Thanks, Ben. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas with you about the Afrobarometer. I don't know if you're all familiar with the survey. It's a Pan-African research network that has been operative since 1999. Thus far, we've completed 9 rounds of surveys, so our data dates back to 1999, and it is most certainly the richest data set on democracy and governance in Africa. On the website, we publish our material as well as our data sets. So those of you confident that you can do the statistics, you're welcome to download the data sets. These would be for round 1 to 8 on the Afrobarometer website. We started the project because everybody said Africans can't do survey research. It is our aim to give ordinary Africans a voice in terms of democracy and governance. So I'd be happy to field the questions. I asked the question, do Namibians still want democracy? Because we assume that if there's no demand for democracy, or there's very little demand for democracy, there's no need in having democracy. Our original inspiration for the questions around democracy comes from Winston Churchill, where he said democracy is probably the worst form of government except for others. I've broken down the data into what I thought would be interesting social groupings for our audience. First of all, we asked people whether they think democracy is the best system there is, or whether they would like to have some form of non-democratic alternative. On the left-hand side, you see that we break it down by age. And since 2014, support for democracy has declined with more than 20 percentage points. So high up in the 70s in 2014, and currently just over half the population still prefers democracy. The key issue here is that the rate with which support for democracy is declining in our society are equal across ages. That means the youth is no longer producing more Democrats. The youth has to learn about democracy. Democrats aren't born, they're made. And I do believe this reflects poorly on the kind of civic education that we currently conduct. At the same time, Namibians reject support for one-party rule or one-man rule or support for military government. But you can see, again, since 2019, support for the non-democratic alternatives are on the increase, especially that of military government. So around 1 in 4 Namibians think support for a military government is maybe not such a bad idea. We have additional questions where we probe this, but I think this is a very worrying trend. So if support for democracy is that low, it also follows that satisfaction with democracy must be declining. And again, the 2014 threshold is quite clear. 75% of Namibians were satisfied or very satisfied with democracy in 2014. It's now just around 50%. So what causes this? We ask a number of questions about how well government is doing in terms of its economic policies. And there's our list of them: managing the economy, narrowing the income gap, fighting corruption, creating jobs, and improving living. And the public view has declined. Only around 1 in 5 people these days think that government is doing fairly well or very well in terms of its economic policies. The trend is the same for social policies. Here we talk about basic health services, education needs, water sanitation, and supply of electricity. It's slightly better than the economic policies, but it is still going downwards. We ask a number of questions about elected institutions. I've just selected 3. They are perhaps representative of the 3 levels of government. So first of all, you can see that approval in the presidency has gone from around 91% in 2003 to just over 50% in 2021. The same for the members of parliament and for local councillors. In other words, our institutions are also not performing. On the right-hand side, I put up the disapproval rates. You can see 1 in 2 Namibians don't approve of local government or local councillors, and around 4 in 10 don't approve of president and the National Assembly. So like policies, institutions are not doing well for most Namibians. The next is we probe, and I can just say, we've also asked questions about state institutions, the courts and all those. The trends are the same. There seems to be a diffuse negativity that is set in towards institutions. That meaning it's not targeted at any one institution, but it is against government as a whole. In terms of trust, I've identified 3 categories of trusters, if you like. Those with deep trust, or the trusters, are people that always trust the particular institution. Skeptics are people that say, I trust them a little or somewhat. And then cynics are people who say, I never trust them. And you can see, for example, that trust in the president has gone from a high in 2008 to a low of 27% in 2021. So the number of people with deep trust in the presidency are now around 1 in every 4 Namibians. At the same time, since 2006, we see that the number of skeptics have increased. It is currently 54% of people that says they either trust the president just a little or somewhat. And even more worrying is that since about 2008, the number of cynics, people that says I don't trust him at all, has increased with more than 10 percentage points. We see the same kind of trend in the National Assembly. Here, the number of trusters has declined from 42% in 2014 to just 18%. The number of skeptics are at 56%, and the number of cynics has increased threefold from 7 to 22%. And I think this sort of helps us understand that the lack of performance has consequences, and the loss of trust or the conversion of trust into cynicism and skepticism are the consequences of that. So you can see there's a direct link between approval in the president and deep trust in the president. As approval had gone down from 88% to 54%, for the same period since 2014, 56% have deep trust or had deep trust in 2014. It is now 27%. The same with the National Assembly. 2014 is a watershed year, and the trend is downwards. The next cluster of institutions we asked about is political parties. It is very difficult to imagine a democracy without parties. Parties are absolutely crucial. The traditional idea is that political parties link society with government, that these parties are mass political institutions that mobilize people, that present policy options, that recruit political talent to act as representatives. Here too, we see that we ask the question whether people feel close to any political party, and if so. And you can see that in urban and rural areas both, the level of partisanship has declined quite substantially for political parties. The same thing by age. You can see that around 2014, 80% of Namibians, irrespective of their age, has said that they feel close to a party. It has gone down, 39% currently under Namibians, or among Namibians 18 to 25 years, 48% 26 to 35-year-olds, and then for the society on average 52%. In other words, that the gap between the youth and parties are growing at an accelerated rate when we compare that with the rest of society. We have an index in the Afrobarometer that we call Lived Poverty. And with lived poverty, we ask people how often they and their households have to go without 5 basic necessities: food, water, cash, medical services, and cooking fuel. And I've just highlighted the 2 that at the moment are the highest in Namibia: food insecurity and a loss of cash. And I can tell you now, overall, about 63% of Namibians had to go without enough food to eat at least once during 2020. And 76% had to go without enough cash at least once during 2020. Lived poverty in Namibia now are at the levels of 2006. So all the gains in terms of eradication of poverty has been eliminated. So if we just look at food, you can see since 2014, the people that had regularly had to go without food increased from 6 to 24%, that's 4-fold. And for cash, that is doubled. So from 21 to 42%. At the same time, you can see that feelings of closeness have gone down from 80% to 52%. So feelings of closeness is directly related to people's vulnerability. Looking at trust in parties, we see that the decline in trust is like the same as in the other institutions. In the ruling party, it peaked the number of people who always trust the ruling party from 42% to just 17%. In opposition parties, these trust levels remain more or less constant, slow declines, because there's never been a lot of trust. But look at closeness of parties, it follows the same downward trend. So as we find that closeness of parties diminished, trust in parties diminished, or the other way around. The less people trust their parties, the more they feel distance from them. So I think, I'll wrap up because we all have a time limit. What I'm trying to tell you with this is that our democracy at this moment has clear, serious problems. The one is that in the eyes of Namibians, democracy no longer delivers. In some societies, the argument would be that democracy has intrinsic value, that it's good for people to have the freedom of speech, that it's good for people to have human rights, and all these intrinsic qualities. In poorer societies, though, the expectation is that democracy has also to deliver on economic goods. We have to address poverty. It has to look at income gaps and all these things that we've highlighted. Our democracy, I believe, is losing support because it's not seen to be delivering. The second point is that the Namibian society and government, we're busy developing a suspended state. We've got lots of questions asking how often do you have contact with, and then we list government officials or party members and so on. There's almost no contact with the society. This means that the state operates in a vacuum, that the state and ministries often operate for their own good rather than that of the people. We've seen that people are very critical about the performance in terms of policies and in terms of institutions. The third point, it is my belief that our institutions have been hollowed out. Our democratic institutions exist in name and on paper, but they don't deliver. It's part of the reason why democracy is seen not to be working. A fourth important problem is that trust in political and public institutions have been converted into cynicism and skepticism. These things are closely related to performance, but they are so extensive, it's not focused on any one or two institutions, it's across board. In order for democracy to regain trust, we have to revise these institutions. These institutions have to become trust-generating entities. And a final point, perhaps even more important, we see that most Namibians have disengaged from the party political scene. We report voter turnout as a percentage of registered voters, which I think is the wrong thing to do. We need to look at the voting age population, the population of people who are 18 years and older and thus entitled to vote. If we look at that, the last election in 2019 produced only 55% turnout. That means 45% of people of voting age have not voted. They probably haven't registered either. So we're seeing that people are leaving the political sphere. Political parties are more and more operating like cartels rather than mass political institutions. I think it's a clear indication that what's around and what's available at the moment, including the ruling party, does not have the same level of public opinion as before. And I think what's happening, this is happening quicker amongst the younger people. So our society is in desperate need for political homes for a large chunk of our citizens who've lost their political voice. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I think, there would be another question? Yeah, okay. I'll stop here. Thank you.